Hey, another reaction video underway. We are on one of my favorite podcasts of all time. It's Flagrant. If you know the crew, my goodness, Andrew Schulz is one of my favorite comedians there is. Big fans. It was so cool to see them pair up with Graham Hancock here. It was definitely a collaboration I didn't expect, but if you know the Flagrant crew, then you'll know that they're really down to ask all the deep questions. And this little segment that I had scrolled up on that I wanted to explore with you guys is based on psychedelics. Of course, it's a prevailing topic, possibly a pervasive topic, an exciting one, an interesting one nonetheless, and it definitely begs a lot of questions around the concepts of consciousness, as we know, altered states of mind, alternate realities. Who in the world knows? That's for us to figure out here and see what Graham has to say with his years and years of experience, and we'll see how Flagrant responds. So let's get into it.
Apparently JFK had experiences with psychedelics.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Right into it. Let's go.
Again, this is a mistake that our society has made, is to cut us. And maybe it's not a mistake. I don't really do conspiracy theories, but maybe it was a deliberate thing back when the war on drugs was declared. It's under,
Well, we did a lot of research with psychedelics.
Psychedelics lead people to ask questions. They don't leave us comfortable with the prevailing order of things, both in ourselves.
There we go.
And
Yes. It begs us to ask questions. Now, I'm not so keen on the topic of psychedelics in that. I'm not too sure, but this is the basis of philosophy right here, is asking new questions, which allows us to perceive reality in new forms. My goodness, it's a great thesis to start out with here, and I'm curious to see how we navigates this within the context of psychedelics. But yes, I love that. The questions are what will yield us the experience. The questions are what are going to allow us to think in ways that we haven't thought before, to question the paradigms that we initially accepted and agreed. And not saying that we should ever trash the old paradigms just because they're old paradigms, but just look at them in a new way and see if they're in alignment with how we view the world, with how we act in the world today. I find that so fascinating. We don't ask enough questions. That is imperative, I believe, to understanding how we're going to evolve effectively in the future. So hat off to Graham. Let's go.
Functions and we
Schulz is a fan too.
Become critical and questioning in a way that we might not have been before.
Yeah.
And I think this was felt to be dangerous, and they were demonized with lies and complete dishonesty. But they were.
Do you remember when psychedelics were gaining popularity? This is what, 19...
when you say gaining popularity...
60s, mainstream popularity.
Well, I don't think you could call hippies, mainstream in
It's
any
so
way.
funny. The way that we look back on them, they were the mainstream.
Yeah.
It was like they're the dominant culture, but I guess they were fringe and odd for the time.
They were fringe and odd.
Anyone here recall Woodstock? I definitely don't. Well beyond my time, but iconic time period of human history.
They were
so funny.
And they were feared by those rooted and grounded in mainstream culture.
Yeah, hippie was a pejorative, right?
Yeah, it was a pejorative. He's just a hippie.
Yeah.
It was a negative term. So I guess that we're looking at a shift in human consciousness that certainly began probably in the late 50s and was well underway in the 60s. And had it been allowed to continue, it might well have transformed society in many, many ways. But then it was clamped down upon, and all these lies and propaganda were spread, false stories about how dangerous psychedelics are. I want to be very clear about that. Psychedelics are extremely serious business.
Yeah.
And this needs to be understood. I do not believe that psychedelics are for children, or cannabis for that matter. I think we'd be much better keeping them out of the hands of children if they were totally legal, and it was accompanied by wise advice.
They can also unearth existing psychological issues.
Yes, they can.
You have to be really dangerous. Really careful.
If somebody's suffering from schizophrenia, psychedelics could be very bad news. And
a lot of people don't know that they have schizophrenia.
A lot of people don't
especially
know.
Yeah, moral of the story, don't do drugs, kids. But I'm very conflicted when thinking about things in this way. When thinking about, let's say, the hippie culture, so to speak, as they're referring to, especially back in the 60s, it's like maybe they did question the pedagogy, or maybe they did question the formal structures that exist, which I do believe, as just mentioned with philosophical conversations and questions, is something that's a necessity for us to evolve effectively, for us to do things in accordance with our highest values. Now, I'm just trying to put myself and throw myself back in that stage. Let's say Woodstock, and never mind all the great music, but just trying to imagine myself as an individual in that time of life who is a hippie, and thinking is like, if because I'm just on those drugs and asking those questions, if those are actual real questions. It's kind of like the difference between that stoner mentality of, oh, someone's so high and they feel like they have all these cool questions and answers to the keys of the universe. And it's like, it can almost be viewed as a lazy way to approach questions, because it's not deductive reasoning. It's just the ability to throw out questions and see what happens in return. And while there does seem to be benefit to that, because you're able to become more creative and break out of that box of how you thought before, I'm also torn because I don't understand or don't know if that's actually the best apparatus for us to be asking questions through. Like there's no basis for deductive inquiry when just getting high and asking those questions, unless those questions are seeming to come from a greater sense of self. How do we know if the questions we're asking are the right questions, and just throwing a bunch of loose questions out there is really do the job? Or should we have more of a framework, more boundaries when asking questions, to see if they really do reflect how we're experiencing the world right now? And it's like the great concept, something that I'm so fascinated, so enamored by, is the concept that the universe is the answer. We just need to find the right questions. And I think that is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here in the first place when we look at things philosophically, is we see the answers in front of us, we feel the answers, but we don't know the questions that will allow us to actually interact with it. So yeah, let's see what else they have to say here.
So there is an element of danger and risk, and this is why a sitter who's deeply experienced with the substance is
your shaman, essentially.
Yeah. We haven't yet invented a word for shaman in Western culture, but we need to. The word comes from Tungus Mongol. It means one who sees, right. And it was then applied by anthropologists because they found that figure, that person who played that role, was found in multiple different cultures all around the world. And they said, let's just call them all shamans. Right. But the word comes from a specific culture. And we don't have a word for that in our culture yet. Facilitator or sitter are the ones that I use. This is one of the many areas where Western culture would do well to learn from indigenous cultures that have been using psychedelics responsibly for thousands and thousands of years.
What is responsible psychedelic use to you? What do you start with? What do you do it with?
Intentions, meditation, things like that.
Yeah, it's intentions, meditations. It's not recreational. You're not taking it to have a party.
That was the point that I was making there. It's like if you do approach it recreationally, then all the power to you. Be safe, whatever they're referring to regards to being responsible. But do the questions that come out of that approach really have any merit to them? And maybe they do, because maybe psychedelics, and this is just my lack of experience, maybe they do have the power to really unlock your brain even without the intention going in. Now, this is where I'd listen much more to what Graham would have to say in this regard, because he has experimented. But I think that what I'm trying to say is maybe the best way to optimize that experience and make sure that you do come out with the best questions is to have the intention going into it. It's in the acknowledging of going into the experience that you might be completely shook by whatever happens that allows you to be open to the questions and accepting of the questions moving forward afterwards. So you know what to at least do with the questions, right? Because the questions might always linger there. You might not just be able to articulate them if you don't have the intention going in. Now, again, with my lack of knowledge of the experience, I don't know what that's like. But it's more so about finding the best route to philosophical inquiry when approaching such drastic experiences, such as reality-altering experiences, and that's what we seem to be leading to here.
Taking it to make contact with the dead. Ayahuasca means the vine of the dead, or the vine of souls. Iboga is the plant that enables people to see the dead. That's what these things mean. There's so much of a connection to the afterlife with them, and that's a serious inquiry. If you've lost a relative recently and you've not had closure, it can be very beneficial to have an afterlife contact with that person. And many people report this experience. I've had the experience myself with Iboga.
Really?
Yeah, I met my dad. He passed away shortly before that. Now again, the scientists could say, you were just fantasizing that. It was just your imagination. But I met him.
Fuck the scientists. So what happened?
He came to me in the vision. It was shadowy, but he basically made me feel okay about the key issue, which was I was not with him at his deathbed.
Wow.
And I was haunted by that. And after that, I didn't feel haunted by it anymore.
There we go.
And increasingly with my experiences with psychedelics over many decades now, I have no fear of death. I don't fear death. I do fear pain. I do fear humiliation. Old age, I'm 72, 73 next birthday. You know, I have to be realistic about this. I only have so long in this incarnation. As we get older, our bodies get infirm, get weaker. We become more and more I don't like being dependent on others in any way. And I detest pain. And I would like to, who doesn't? And
We're only human.
I'd like to avoid it as much as possible. But death, I don't fear.
Wow. Well, that was quite the heavy hitter. But what do you really think that is? He was just referring to his experience where he had communicated with his father after his passing and gained us an acceptance that he wasn't there on his deathbed. And do you think that experience was a figment of his imagination coming to light? Or do you think he really did interact with an energy that was outside of this dense world that we feel and see right here? That's one of the big questions, right? And for that to then concurrently alleviate the fear of death, I just what does that even feel like? Because if we assume that the fear of death is greatly due to, in part, the unknown, then it seems to be that it was alleviated on his end because he was able to experience alternate realities and therefore was now able to have an understanding that there very well may be something after this physical life that we're living in this human form right now, and you're okay with that. And it seems to be that we're not okay with the fact that there might be nothingness, right? So why are we not okay with that, even if we're not there to experience it? If everything that we're thinking, feeling is bound by an experience subjectively, then why do we have to fear something that doesn't include those parameters at all, even if we're not going to experience it? And this, I think, has something to do with wanting to continuously evolve. It's so embedded in our DNA to have this sense of evolution, this creation, this sense of acting and moving forward. And it's almost like we don't know where it comes from, and we want it to transcend the physical realm. And it very well may. I'm not here to make an argument whether it does or doesn't. I just want to ask the questions to see how could we approach it, and how could we look at life in a new way, such as how Graham did here, to be able to rid ourselves of fear and live our lives in the fullest manner. So I again do not know exactly where what kind of experience that he had, particularly with what he's referring to here, but to have an experience so strong that it just completely rids your fear of death, if you initially did have a fear of death, is quite a life-changing experience. And it just seems to be a perspective change, right? Nothing may have actually happened differently in his external world. It was just it could have been something that was tapped into within his subconscious that was triggered by a psychedelic experience, or he was contacted by an ethereal being. And both of them seem what would yield the same outcome, right? So what does that have to say about our nature? What does that have to say about our relationship with life? Do we need something bigger and greater than us, or a supposed being greater than us, to have an acceptance, a confirmation, a relaxation towards life? Who knows? Who knows? How can we activate those? I think that what I'm very interested and curious in here is, how can we tap into those modes and states of mind without the use of psychedelics? How can we question, now back to the questions again, being that it's been such a relevant topic in this video for sure, how can we question ourselves into reshaping our subconscious? What are the questions we need to ask ourselves to have those revelatory experiences that do shake us to our core, that could change our perspective for the better? And I think questions themselves really do have the power to do that. It's just figuring out what they are, because the questions will open up. They're like portals to new pathways of understanding life, right? And it seems to be that psychedelics just crack open that Pandora's box and say, well, screw it, whatever's here to open will, and the questions will come as a consequence, and then your subconscious will take note of that and act differently moving forward, right? Or do you think that having those psychedelic experiences would actually be more beneficial, because you have to get in the zone to be able to have an experience that would reshape you for good? Because can you imagine randomly having an experience that would reshape you for good without it being a huge experience external from you? That would even shake you to your core in and of itself. Just having a question, and boom, your whole worldview changes. So maybe we do need the psychedelic experience as sort of a pivotal moment that will allow us to see life in a new way and confront death in a new way. It seems so odd. We have this weird relationship with death, of course, because it is the great unknown. and that's fearful. Well, when you look at the microcosms, we fear unknown all around us, whether it's our job or relationships, anything of our day-to-day. So the fear of the unknown has something to do with probabilities, and in the probability that something might go awry, that's where we have fear, because something might actually go wrong. But if we look into the Stoics very briefly here, we will see, I believe it was Seneca who said that we suffer more in imagination than we do reality. So that in itself was quite a trip, so to speak. Graham, he's a solid character. Again, big fan of Flagrant. I really, really recommend you check out their podcast. They're funny guys. And we'll see you on the next time. Please like and subscribe. It's been super fun. Let's keep exploring these questions with each of you. Have a great one.